The darkness of space stretched endlessly before the exploration vessel. As it drifted past the edge of known territory, Commander Doyen sat in the captain's chair, watching the stars through the observation window. His crew had been out here for 3 months, mapping the outer regions of the solar system. It was supposed to be a routine mission. Nothing exciting ever happened this far from Earth. Hannah, the ship's pilot, noticed something strange on her scanner. A signal was coming from somewhere beyond the Kuiper Belt. It was faint, but definitely artificial. She called Doyen over to look at the readings. This was unusual. Humans had never detected alien technology before. Doyen made the decision to investigate. The ship changed course, moving toward the source of the signal. It took them 2 days to reach it. What they found took their breath away. A massive structure floated in the void. It was clearly ancient, covered in strange markings that no human language could match. The station was dark and silent, but still intact after countless years in space. Minho, the ship's engineer, confirmed it was safe to dock. The structure had atmosphere inside, though the air was stale and cold. The crew put on their suits and entered the alien station. Emergency lights flickered on as they walked through the corridors. Jiwoo, the xenobiologist, was amazed by everything she saw. The architecture was beautiful but alien. Whoever built this place had been far more advanced than humanity. They found what looked like a control room. Ancient computers lined the walls, most of them dead. But one terminal was still active, its screen glowing with soft blue light. Jiwoo approached it carefully. The interface was complex, but she managed to activate something. A holographic projection appeared in the center of the room. The hologram showed an alien creature. It was tall and thin, with 4 arms and large eyes. The creature began to speak. The words were foreign, but the ship's computer translated them into English. The translation was rough but understandable. The alien introduced itself as a Vorathi, a species that once thrived in this sector of space. This station was one of their last outposts. The message was a warning recorded in their final days. The Vorathi spoke of something called the Dominion. The Dominion was a coalition of powerful alien species. They ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. Any civilization that showed promise was either enslaved or destroyed. The Dominion could not tolerate competition. They could not allow new powers to rise and challenge their authority. The Vorathi had tried to negotiate. They had offered friendship and trade. The Dominion responded with war. The Vorathi fought back, but they were no match for the massive fleets that came for them. World after world fell. Their people were scattered, enslaved, or killed. This station was one of the last places to fall silent, but the warning was not about the Vorathi. It was about Earth. The hologram explained that the Dominion had vast networks of sensors throughout the galaxy. Any species that developed certain technologies would trigger these sensors. Faster than light communication, advanced fusion power, artificial gravity. Humanity had recently achieved all 3. Earth had been detected. The Dominion knew humans existed now. Their scout fleets would already be on their way. The Vorathi estimated it would take about 6 months for the Dominion to reach Earth, maybe less. Once they arrived, humanity would receive an ultimatum. Submit or die. The hologram's message grew more desperate. The Vorathi begged whoever found this warning to prepare. They explained that the Dominion did not see emerging species as equals. They saw them as threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. Negotiation was pointless. Mercy was not possible. The only choice was to fight or accept extinction. The message ended with a final statement. The Vorathi had thought they were strong enough to resist. They were wrong. They hoped whoever found this message would be wiser, stronger, or luckier than they had been. The hologram faded. The control room fell silent again. The 4 crew members stood in shock, processing what they had just learned. Humanity was not alone in the universe, but the galaxy was not the peaceful place they had imagined. It was ruled by tyrants who would come to destroy Earth simply because humans had the audacity to reach for the stars. Doyen made the decision immediately. They had to return to Earth. The government needed to know. The military needed to prepare. Everyone needed to know that war was coming. The crew rushed back to their ship. They gathered what data they could from the station, including a complete copy of the Vorathi warning. Hannah set course for Earth at maximum speed. The journey home felt much longer than the journey out. When they finally reached Earth, Doyen transmitted the warning directly to the United Earth Council. Within hours, the message was broadcast to every nation on the planet. Billions of people watched the Varathi hologram deliver its terrible warning. The world fell into chaos. Some people refused to believe it. They claimed it was a hoax or a mistake. But most people knew the truth when they heard it. The evidence was undeniable. The Varathi technology was real. The warning was real. The threat was real. Fear spread across Earth like wildfire. People panicked in the streets. Stock markets crashed. Some governments tried to maintain order, while others collapsed entirely. But beneath the fear, something else began to grow. Something that would define humanity's response to the coming storm. Anger, determination, defiance. Humanity had just learned they were not alone in the universe. They had learned that the galaxy was ruled by beings who saw them as nothing more than insects to be crushed. But humanity had faced extinction before. They had survived ice ages and plagues. They had endured wars and disasters. They had clawed their way from caves to the stars through sheer stubborn will. The Dominion was coming to destroy them. They had 6 months to prepare for an enemy they could not hope to defeat. The odds were impossible. Victory seemed like a fantasy. But humanity had never been good at accepting the inevitable. In military bases around the world, soldiers began preparing for war. In laboratories, scientists began weaponizing every technology they had. In factories, workers began building warships. In homes, families said goodbye to loved ones who enlisted to fight. Humanity had 6 months to prepare. It would not be enough time, but they would use every second of it. Because the alternative was surrender, and surrender meant the end of everything humanity had ever built or dreamed of achieving. The message was clear. The Dominion was coming, and humanity would be ready to scream back at the void. The United Earth Council met in an emergency session that lasted 3 days. Representatives from every nation gathered to discuss humanity's survival. Arguments erupted over strategy, resources, and leadership. But everyone agreed on one thing. Earth needed to prepare for war immediately. Admiral Sun Wu was appointed Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces. He was a career military officer who had served in peacekeeping missions across Earth. Now he faced an impossible task. Build a military force capable of fighting an enemy that had conquered countless worlds. Chief Scientist Yuna received an equally difficult assignment. She had to weaponize every piece of human technology, no matter how experimental or dangerous. Nuclear weapons would not be enough. Humanity needed new tools of war. They needed them fast. The mobilization began immediately. Every nation contributed whatever they could. Factories that produced cars and appliances were converted to manufacture weapons and armor. Shipyards that built cargo vessels now constructed warships. Universities became research centers focused solely on military applications. The cost was enormous. Resources that normally fed cities were redirected to the war effort. Power grids were strained to their limits. People faced shortages of food, medicine, and basic supplies. But few complained. Everyone understood the stakes. Millions volunteered for military service. Among them was Tai Hyung, a schoolteacher from Seoul. He had no military experience, but he enlisted anyway. His students asked him why he was leaving. He told them someone had to fight and running away would not save anyone. Nari, a doctor from Busan, also volunteered. She had spent her life healing people. Now she would learn to fight. The irony was not lost on her, but she saw no alternative. If the Dominion won, there would be no hospitals, no patients, no future for medicine at all. Training camps opened across the world. Recruits like Taehyung and Nari learned basic combat skills in weeks instead of months. There was no time for proper training. They would learn the rest in battle or not at all. Admiral Sun Wu worked 20-hour days coordinating the defense. He knew the truth that many others refused to accept. Humanity would lose this war. The Dominion had technology centuries ahead of Earth. They had fleets that numbered in the thousands. They had conquered species far more advanced than humans. But Sun Wu also knew that losing slowly was better than losing quickly. Every day humanity survived was another day to prepare, to learn, to fight. If they made the Dominion pay dearly for every inch of space, perhaps they could buy enough time for a miracle. Chief Scientist Yuna made progress on new weapons. She stripped particle accelerators from research facilities and turned them into ship-mounted cannons. She converted fusion reactors into bombs. She experimented with electromagnetic pulse weapons that could disable enemy systems. Nothing was off limits. Ethics and safety regulations were abandoned in favor of effectiveness. 5 months passed in a blur of preparation. Earth's orbital space became crowded with defensive platforms. The moon was covered in weapons installations. Mars' colony built its own defenses. Humanity had constructed a fleet of over 200 warships. It was the largest military force humans had ever assembled. It would not be enough. The Dominion arrived exactly when the Vorathi warning predicted. Their advanced fleet consisted of 12 massive warships. Each one was larger than anything humanity had ever built. The ships were sleek and powerful, humming with energy that human sensors could barely detect. The Dominion broadcast a message on all frequencies. The translation was clear and cold. They identified themselves as the Krell, a warrior species that served as the Dominion's military enforcers. They had come to deliver an ultimatum. Humanity would surrender immediately. Earth would be catalogued and its resources extracted. The human population would be relocated to labor worlds where they would serve the Dominion. Resistance would result in complete extermination. Humanity had 1 hour to respond. The United Earth Council convened again. Some representatives argued for surrender. At least some humans would survive as slaves. Others argued for negotiation. Perhaps they could reason with the Krell, find some middle ground. Admiral Sunwoo listened to all the arguments. Then he spoke. His words were simple and direct. The Dominion had already made their decision. Humans were not equals to be negotiated with. They were resources to be harvested or threats to be eliminated. Surrender would only delay the inevitable. If humanity was going to die, they should die fighting. The Council voted. The decision was not unanimous, but it was clear. Earth would fight. Admiral Sunwoo himself delivered humanity's response. He broadcast it across all frequencies, ensuring the Krell would hear it clearly. His message was a single word: no. The Krell seemed surprised by the response. They had expected fear or desperate pleas for mercy. They had not expected defiance. After a brief pause, they began their attack. The Battle of Luna began near Earth's moon. Admiral Sunwoo deployed the defense fleet to intercept the Krell. 200 human ships faced 12 alien warships. The odds should have favored humanity through numbers alone. They did not. The Krell weapons were devastating. Energy beams cut through human ships like paper. Missiles that should have destroyed targets simply bounced off alien shields. Human weapons barely scratched the Krell armor. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Taehyung commanded a destroyer called the Defiant. He watched as ships around him were torn apart. Crews he had trained with died in explosions that turned their vessels into debris. His own ship took heavy damage. Hull breaches killed half his crew. Life support was failing. He made a decision. If he was going to die, he would take at least one enemy with him. Taehyung ordered maximum speed and aimed directly at a Krell cruiser. His remaining crew understood immediately. No one objected. The Defiant accelerated toward the enemy. The Krell tried to destroy it, but Taehyung pushed the engines beyond their limits. The ship was falling apart, but it kept moving. In the final seconds, Taehyung broadcast a message to Earth. Tell them we were here. The Defiant collided with the Krell cruiser at tremendous speed. The impact created an explosion that consumed both ships. The cruiser broke apart, its reactor going critical and destroying 2 nearby Krell vessels in the secondary explosion. Dozens of other human captains saw what Taehyung had done. They followed his example. Ships that were too damaged to fight became weapons themselves. Human crews rammed their vessels into Krell warships in suicide attacks that the aliens had never encountered before. The Krell fleet, which had entered battle with calm confidence, found itself fighting an enemy that refused to die quietly. Human ships that should have retreated kept fighting. Crews that should have surrendered chose death instead. The ferocity was unlike anything the Krell had experienced in centuries of conquest. When the battle finally ended, the Krell had won. But the cost was higher than they expected. Of the 12 ships that entered the battle, only 7 remained operational. The rest were destroyed or too damaged to continue. The Krell commander made the decision to withdraw and wait for reinforcements. Earth had lost over 150 ships. Thousands of soldiers were dead. But they had bloodied the Dominion's nose. They had proven that humanity would fight back. News of the battle spread across Dominion space through their communication networks. Other species heard about the humans who chose death over submission. To most of the Dominion, it seemed foolish and primitive. But to the enslaved races who had surrendered long ago, it was something else. It was hope. 18 months passed after the Battle of Luna. Earth used that time to rebuild and fortify. But everyone knew that Krell would return. When they did, they would bring overwhelming force. The Dominion did not make the same mistake twice. Their invasion fleet arrived with over 400 warships. The armada stretched across space like a dark cloud. This time there would be no retreat. The Krell commander had orders to make an example of Earth. Humanity would be erased. The siege began immediately. The Krell established a blockade around Earth, preventing any ships from leaving or entering. They began systematic bombardment of military installations. Orbital defense platforms were destroyed one by one. Human warships that tried to break the blockade were hunted down and eliminated. Mars colony fell within a week. The Krell landed ground forces and overwhelmed the defenders. The colony's communication went silent. Humanity lost contact with 3 million people. Later, scout ships reported that Mars had been glassed from orbit. The surface was burned clean. Nothing survived. The outer mining colonies suffered the same fate. Jupiter's moons, Saturn's stations, even the research outpost in the asteroid belt, all destroyed. The Krell were methodical and thorough. They wanted humanity to understand that resistance was pointless, but Earth refused to surrender. Admiral Sunwoo reorganized the defense forces. He knew conventional battles were suicide. Humanity needed different tactics. They needed to hurt the Krell in ways the enemy did not expect. Captain Hunwoo took command of a squadron of stealth frigates. These ships were small and fast, designed for reconnaissance rather than combat. But Hyunwoo had a different plan. He would use them for hit-and-run attacks. The stealth squadron began targeting Krell supply lines. They would hide in asteroid fields or behind moons, waiting for supply ships to pass. Then they would strike fast, destroy the target, and disappear before reinforcements arrived. The attacks were small, but they added up over time. The Krell were not used to this kind of warfare. They expected enemies to meet them in open battle. They did not expect prey that hunted back. Supply ships started traveling with armed escorts, but that meant fewer warships for the main fleet. Hyunwoo's tactics were working. On occupied Mars, something unexpected happened. Survivors from the initial invasion had hidden in underground tunnels and old mining shafts. They began organizing resistance cells. Among them was Nari, the doctor who had enlisted to fight. Nari's medical knowledge proved valuable in the harsh conditions of occupied Mars. She treated wounded fighters and kept people alive in tunnels that were never meant for long-term habitation. But she also learned to fight. She led raids on Krell mining operations, sabotaging equipment and rescuing human prisoners. The Krell brought human captives to Mars to work the mines. These prisoners were treated as disposable labor. Nari's resistance fighters rescued groups of prisoners whenever possible. Each rescue was dangerous and many fighters died. But every human saved was a small victory against the Dominion. Back on Earth, Chief Scientist Yuna made a breakthrough. She had been studying the salvaged Varathi technology for months. Combined with human nuclear weapons research, she developed something new. She called it the Singularity Torpedo. The weapon was designed to create a temporary micro-black hole. The gravitational forces would tear apart anything nearby, including Krell warships. The problem was that the weapon was incredibly unstable. It could malfunction and destroy the ship that launched it. Safety protocols meant nothing in a war for survival. Yuna pushed forward with production. The Krell tightened their grip on Earth. Cities were bombed from orbit. Billions of people died. Food production collapsed. Clean water became scarce. Humanity was being slowly strangled. The Krell commander knew that time was on his side. Eventually, Earth would be too weak to resist. But beneath the suffering, humanity's resolve hardened. Survivors in the ruins of cities refused to give up. Resistance fighters continued their attacks even when victory seemed impossible. Every day humanity survived was a day they denied the Dominion their prize. The Krell commander grew frustrated. His orders were to conquer Earth quickly and move on to other targets. But humanity refused to break. He decided to end the siege with overwhelming force. He would gather the entire fleet and bombard Earth until nothing remained. Humanity would be made an example. Other species would see what happened to those who defied the Dominion. The attack was scheduled for the following day. The Krell broadcast their intentions openly. They wanted humanity to know that the end was coming. They wanted Earth to feel terror in their final hours. In the ruins of Geneva, deep underground, Admiral Sunwoo gathered what remained of Earth's military leadership. The situation was hopeless. The Krell fleet would reduce Earth to ash. There was no defense that could stop them. But Sunwoo had one final plan. It was desperate and would likely fail, but it was the only option left. He addressed the officers in the bunker. His voice was calm despite the circumstances. He explained that they were not fighting for victory anymore. Victory was impossible. They were fighting so that humanity would be remembered. Every Krell ship they destroyed was proof that humanity existed and refused to be erased. Sunwoo revealed Yuna's singularity torpedoes. There were enough for every remaining human warship to carry one. The plan was simple. They would launch a coordinated attack on the Krell flagship. Every ship would fire their torpedo at the same time. The combined gravitational distortions might destroy the flagship and damage the surrounding fleet. The cost would be total. Every human ship would likely be destroyed in the attack. But if they succeeded, they would cripple the Krell fleet. Earth might buy a few more months before the next invasion. It was not much, but it was something. The officers accepted the plan without argument. They had known from the beginning that they would die in this war. At least now they would die striking back. Messages were sent to every remaining ship. The attack would begin in 12 hours. Captain Hyunwoo received his orders while hiding in an asteroid field. His stealth squadron was too far away to join the main attack. Instead, they would serve as a distraction. They would hit Krell supply depots on the far side of the fleet, drawing away reinforcements. It was a suicide mission, but it would give the main attack force a better chance. Hyunwoo gathered his crew and explained the plan. No one objected. They had all accepted death long ago. The only question was how much damage they could do before the end. On Mars, Nari heard about the final attack through resistance communication channels. She knew what it meant. Earth was making its last stand. She gathered her fighters and planned one final raid. If Earth was going to die screaming, Mars would do the same. Across the solar system, humanity prepared for its final battle. Soldiers checked their weapons one last time. Engineers made final repairs to damaged ships. Families said goodbye through broken communication channels. Everyone knew that tomorrow would likely be humanity's last day. But beneath the fear and sadness, there was something else. Pride. Humanity had fought against impossible odds. They had made the Dominion pay for every inch of space. They had refused to surrender even when extinction seemed certain. Whatever happened tomorrow, humanity would face it standing. The galaxy would remember. Humanity had made sure of that. The final battle began at dawn on Earth. What remained of humanity's fleet launched from hidden positions across the solar system. 156 warships, many barely functional, accelerated toward the Krell Armada. Every ship carried one of Chief Scientist Yuna's singularity torpedoes. Every crew knew they were flying to their deaths. Admiral Sunwoo commanded the attack from the bridge of the flagship called Last Stand. He watched as his fleet formed up for the charge. These ships represented humanity's final military force. After today, there would be nothing left to defend Earth, but that was acceptable. If they succeeded in destroying the Krell flagship, the sacrifice would be worth it. The Krell detected the human fleet immediately. They were not concerned. Their scanners showed that the human ships were outnumbered 3-1. The Krell commander ordered his fleet to intercept and destroy the attackers. He expected this to be over quickly. Far on the opposite side of the Krell formation, Captain Hyunwoo's stealth squadron began their distraction attack. They hit a supply depot with everything they had. Explosions rippled across the facility as fuel tanks and ammunition stores went up. The Krell responded by sending 30 warships to deal with the raiders. Hyunwoo knew his squadron could not survive long against 30 enemy ships. But every minute they lasted was another minute for Sunwoo's main force to get closer to the flagship. His pilots fought with desperate courage, dodging between asteroids and fighting running battles. One by one, the stealth ships were destroyed. Hyunwoo's frigate was the last to fall. His final message was broadcast to the fleet. "We bought you time. Make it count." The main human fleet pressed forward through a storm of Krell fire. Energy beams lanced through space, cutting human ships apart. Missiles detonated against hull armor. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes. The human formation began to break apart under the withering assault. But the humans kept coming. Damaged ships did not retreat. Vessels that lost engines used their remaining thrusters to maintain course. Crews that should have evacuated stayed at their posts. The determination was frightening to witness. The Krell had never seen anything like it. Admiral Sun Wu's flagship took heavy damage. Bridge officers died at their stations. Fire spread through multiple decks. Life support failed in several sections. But Sun Wu refused to order evacuation. They were so close to the target. Just a little further. On the moon, Chief Scientist Yuna watched the battle through long-range sensors. She had stayed behind to calibrate the singularity torpedoes remotely. If the timing was wrong, the weapons would fail. She had to make sure every torpedo fired at the exact same moment. Her hands moved across the console, adjusting frequencies and synchronizing targeting systems. A Krell strike force detected the lunar facility where Yuna worked. They diverted 3 ships to destroy it. Yuna knew they were coming. She could have evacuated, but there was no one else who understood the weapons well enough to complete the calibration. She kept working as missiles began hitting the facility around her. The human fleet reached firing range of the Krell flagship. 78 ships remained out of the original 156. Admiral Sun Wu gave the order. Every ship fired their singularity torpedo simultaneously. 28 torpedoes streaked through space toward the massive flagship called Eternal Judgment. The Krell flagship tried to intercept the torpedoes with point defense systems. They destroyed 10 of them, but the remaining 18 reached their target. The torpedoes detonated in a coordinated pattern around the flagship. Reality itself seemed to tear apart. 18 micro-black holes appeared simultaneously. The gravitational forces pulled in opposite directions, creating cascading distortions that no shield could withstand. The flagship's hull buckled and twisted. Internal structures collapsed. The reactor went critical as containment fields failed. The explosion was massive. Eternal Judgment broke apart from the inside out. Debris from the flagship became shrapnel moving at relativistic speeds. The metal fragments tore through nearby Krell ships like bullets through paper. 12 warships were destroyed instantly. Another 20 were severely damaged. In a single desperate strike, humanity had destroyed almost a third of the invasion fleet. The Krell formation fell into chaos. Ships collided with debris. Commanders shouted conflicting orders. The organized armada became a confused mess, but the victory cost everything. The explosion consumed Admiral Sun Wu's flagship and most of the human fleet. Only 15 ships survived the initial blast. They did not last long. The Krell, recovering from shock, destroyed the survivors in minutes. On the moon, Yuna completed her final calibration just as missiles hit her facility. The structure collapsed around her. She died knowing the weapons had worked. Her sacrifice had given humanity its greatest victory. Across Earth, people watched through whatever communication system still functioned. They saw the Krell flagship explode. They saw the enemy fleet fall into disarray. For the first time in months, people dared to hope. Maybe humanity could win. Maybe they had a chance. But the battle's impact reached far beyond Earth. The Dominion's communication networks carried news of the engagement across the galaxy. Subjugated species heard that a primitive race had destroyed a Dominion flagship. The myth of Dominion invincibility shattered. If humans could hurt them, maybe others could too. On a water world called Talros, a species called the Talrin received the news. They had been enslaved by the Dominion for 3 generations. Their industry served Krell shipyards. Their people lived in labor camps. But they had never forgotten their freedom. When they heard about humanity's stand, something awakened in them. The Talrin rose in rebellion. Workers sabotaged production lines in the shipyards. Bombs exploded in Dominion facilities. Guards were overwhelmed by coordinated attacks. Within days, Talros became a war zone. The Dominion had to divert ships from the Earth invasion to suppress the uprising. On other worlds, similar rebellions began. The Veskra, aquatic beings forced into servitude, flooded Dominion bases on water worlds. The Rathani, a species of engineers, turned their technical knowledge against their masters. One by one, enslaved races chose to fight back. On occupied Mars, Nari led her resistance fighters in their largest raid yet. They attacked the main Krell command center, destroying communication equipment and freeing hundreds of prisoners. The attack succeeded because Krell reinforcements were pulled away to deal with other rebellions. From Earth, a single transmission broadcast across all frequencies. It came from the ruins of the Geneva Command Center, sent by junior officers who had survived the bombardment. The message was simple but powerful. This is humanity. We are small. We are broken. But we are not conquered. To those who suffer under the Dominion, rise. We cannot win alone, but together we will make them pay for every world they have taken. The message spread across the galaxy like wildfire. It was translated into hundreds of languages. It was whispered in slave camps and hidden in underground networks. The words became a rallying cry for every species that had ever dreamed of freedom. The galaxy had heard humanity scream, and it was screaming back. The Dominion Council convened an emergency session. Their empire was fracturing. Rebellions were erupting on dozens of worlds. Their military was stretched thin, fighting fires everywhere. They had thought humans were just another primitive species to be crushed. They had been wrong. On Earth, the battered survivors looked up at the stars. The Krell fleet was still there, still dangerous. But it was smaller now, and for the first time since the war began, humanity was not alone. Other species were fighting too. The Dominion had created an empire built on fear. Humanity had shattered that fear. Now the empire was paying the price. The war was far from over. Earth was still dying, billions were still dead, but the galaxy had changed. The impossible had happened. A single desperate act of defiance had ignited a fire across countless worlds. The strong had dominated the weak for so long that they forgot the weak could bite back. Humanity had reminded them, and the galaxy would never forget. The galaxy burned with rebellion. What had started as humanity's desperate stand became a wildfire that consumed the Dominion's empire. On 1,000 worlds, enslaved species rose against their masters. The Dominion's vast military, once focused on crushing Earth, was now divided across countless fronts. The Krell found themselves fighting enemies on every side. Supply lines were cut. Colonies were lost. Shipyards that had produced warships for centuries were destroyed by sabotage. The empire that had ruled through fear and overwhelming force was suddenly vulnerable. Earth remained under siege, but the pressure had lessened. The Krell fleet that remained in orbit was a shadow of what had arrived. Many ships had been pulled away to suppress rebellions elsewhere. The ones that stayed continued bombarding Earth, but their attacks were less coordinated and less effective. Humanity used the breathing room to rebuild. New ships were constructed from salvaged materials. Orbital defenses were repaired. Food production slowly recovered. People emerged from underground shelters and began reclaiming their cities. Earth was scarred and broken, but still alive. General Mirai took command of Earth's forces after Admiral Sunwoo's death. She had served under him during the Battle of Luna and had learned his lessons well. Victory was not about winning battles. It was about surviving long enough to matter. Under her leadership, human tactics became even more aggressive. Human advisors were sent to other rebellious species. They taught guerrilla warfare techniques. They shared weapon designs. They explained how to fight an enemy with superior technology. The term fighting like a human became common across the galaxy. It meant refusing to surrender even when defeat seemed certain. It meant making the enemy pay for every inch of ground. The Tal'Ren, who had sparked the first major rebellion, sent representatives to Earth. They arrived in secret, avoiding Dominion patrols. When they met General Mirai, they thanked humanity for showing them that resistance was possible. Mirai's response was blunt. "Don't thank us yet. We're all still dying, but at least we're dying free." The coalition of rebellious species began coordinating their efforts. Information was shared through secret communication networks. Joint military operations were planned. Slowly, the scattered rebellions merged into something more organized, something dangerous. On Mars, Nari had become a symbol of human resistance. Her raids against Krell forces inspired other fighters. She led attacks that freed thousands of prisoners from labor camps. The Krell put a bounty on her head, but she continued fighting. When asked why she risked so much, her answer was simple: because someone has to, and I'm still breathing. The Veskra, masters of aquatic warfare, shared their techniques with humanity. Human naval forces adapted these tactics for space combat. The Rithani, brilliant engineers, helped improve human weapons and shields. Each species contributed something unique to the coalition. Together, they became stronger than any could be alone. The Dominion Council watched their empire crumble with growing desperation. They convened emergency sessions to debate their response. Some council members argued for total war, recommending they exterminate rebellious species as examples. Others suggested negotiation, proposing they offer concessions to stop the bleeding. After months of debate, the Dominion made a surprising decision. They would sue for peace. They sent ambassadors to Earth offering a treaty. Humanity would be recognized as equals. They would receive a seat on the Dominion Council. All attacks on Earth would cease immediately. The only condition was that humanity must convince the other rebellious species to stand down. The offer was discussed across Earth. Some people wanted to accept. The war had cost 3 billion lives. Earth's cities were ruins. Accepting peace would end the suffering. But others argued that accepting the Dominion's hierarchy, even as equals, betrayed every species still fighting for freedom. General Mirai made the final decision. She traveled to the Galactic Peace Summit where Dominion ambassadors waited. Representatives from dozens of species attended, waiting to hear humanity's response. The chamber fell silent as Mirai stood to speak. She began by acknowledging Earth's losses. 3 billion dead, cities destroyed, colonies glassed. Mirai spoke of the cost of war in terms that everyone understood: pain, grief, and suffering. Then she addressed the Dominion directly. You came to exterminate us because you feared what we might become. You were right to fear us, but not because of our weapons. You feared us because we refused to accept that might makes right. We reject your hierarchy. We reject your peace. The war ends when every enslaved world is free. The Dominion ambassadors were stunned. They had offered humanity everything it could want: peace, recognition, power, and humanity had refused. They tried to argue that continued war would lead to more suffering. Mirai's response ended the debate. You created this suffering when you chose domination over cooperation. You could have met us as friends. Instead, you came to destroy us. Now you face the consequences. We will not stop fighting until your empire is ashes. The Peace Summit collapsed. The Dominion had gambled on humanity accepting their offer. When that failed, they were left with no good options. Their military was overstretched. Their economy was strained by constant warfare. Their authority was questioned by species who had once feared them. The coalition humanity had sparked launched a coordinated offensive. The target was the Dominion core worlds, the heart of their empire. Every species contributed ships and soldiers. The Talrin provided fast attack craft. The Veskra supplied heavy cruisers. Humanity brought its remaining fleet and its tactical expertise. The assault began simultaneously on multiple fronts. While the main fleet attacked the core worlds, smaller forces hit targets across Dominion space: supply depots, communication hubs, military bases. Everything was a target. The Dominion's defenses were spread too thin to stop them all. The battles were brutal. The Dominion fought desperately to protect their homeworlds. Their technology was still superior. Their ships were still powerful. But they were outnumbered and fighting on too many fronts. Slowly, system by system, the Dominion lines collapsed. The war lasted 5 more years. Millions more died on both sides. Entire fleets were destroyed. Planets were scarred by orbital bombardment. But the coalition pressed forward relentlessly. Every victory inspired more species to join the rebellion. The momentum became unstoppable. The final battle occurred at the Dominion's capital world. The coalition fleet faced the last major Dominion force. The fighting was intense, but the outcome was inevitable. The Dominion's military had been ground down by years of constant warfare. When their flagship surrendered, the war effectively ended. The Dominion Council formally surrendered 3 months later. Their core worlds would be occupied. Their military would be dismantled. Their empire was finished. The age of enforced hierarchy had ended, replaced by something new. The Galactic Coalition was founded on principles humanity had fought for: equality among species, voluntary association, the right to self-determination. Every species had a voice, regardless of their military power or technological advancement. It was not perfect, but it was better than what came before. Humanity participated in building the new order, but they did not seek dominance. General Mirai turned down offers to lead the coalition. Human representatives served alongside Talrin, Veskra, Rathani, and dozens of other species. They stood as equals, nothing more. Earth began the long process of recovery. Cities were rebuilt. Colonies were re-established. The population slowly grew again. But Earth would never be the same. 3 billion people were gone. Entire generations had been lost. The scars ran deep. In the ruins of Sol, now being rebuilt with help from allied species, A young girl named Jisoo looked up at the night sky. She could see orbital stations being constructed. Ships from a dozen different species moved between planets. The galaxy was more crowded than ever, but also more peaceful. Her grandmother, a veteran of the Battle of Luna, stood beside her. The old woman had lost an arm in the war and walked with a limp. But she had survived. That was more than many could say. Will they ever try to conquer us again? Jisoo asked. She had been born during the war and barely remembered peace. Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled sadly. Perhaps. The galaxy is vast and full of dangers, but they will remember us. They will remember the species that screamed back at the void, and they will hesitate. Jisoo thought about that. She had learned about the war in school. The desperate battles. The impossible odds. The refusal to surrender. She asked another question. Was it worth it? All those people who died? Her grandmother's smile faded. That's not for me to answer. The dead can't speak, but we survived. We're free. We stand among the stars as equals. That's what they fought for. Whether it was worth the cost is something each person must decide for themselves. A memorial had been erected in Geneva, at the site where Admiral Sunwoo had given his final orders. It listed the names of every human lost in the war. 3 billion names carved into stone that stretched for miles. At the center was an inscription visible from orbit. We were told to kneel. We chose to stand. Let the galaxy remember. Humanity does not surrender. People visited the memorial every day. They left flowers for loved ones. They traced names with their fingers.